Lying in the upper part of New York Bay, between Lower Manhattan and the New Jersey shore, is a speck of land called Ellis Island. For much of the 19th century, it was the site of a naval magazine and a rundown army fort. A little over a half-mile to the southwest is Liberty Island, originally called Bedloe's Island. Since 1886, this has been the home of Frederick Auguste Bartholdi's monumental sculpture, Liberty Enlightening the World. A gift from the people of France, the structure is better known as the Statue of Liberty. A steadfast symbol of freedom and opportunity, she has been a welcoming sight for millions of hopeful immigrants to the United States. So, in 1890, when officials decided to set up a federal immigration depot, Liberty Island, with its iconic statue, seemed the perfect place for it. Why then was the facility erected on Ellis Island instead?
Until the middle of the 19th century, steamship passengers landing in New York could simply walk into the city unhindered by inspections or registrations. On the 13th of April, 1855, the New York State Legislature ordered the opening of a dedicated immigration center to regulate the entry of foreigners. Castle Garden, an entertainment complex at the southern tip of Manhattan Island, was chosen to house the new office, which would be run by New York State's Commissioners of Immigration. The first immigrant was processed there on the 3rd day of August, 1855. In the first 2 decades of its operation, most of the people arriving at Castle Garden came from Ireland, Great Britain, and Germany. But in the early 1880s, increasing numbers of Italians began passing through the station. Many of them were penniless, and they were bound to restrictive contracts they had signed before leaving Italy. What had driven them to endorse such oppressive agreements? By 1880, Italy's stagnant economy had thrown thousands of men out of work. Hoping to find jobs abroad, many Italians desired to emigrate, but few had the means to do so. Dishonest ticket agents offered free transportation to America in exchange for a cut of future wages. These con men doomed their hapless countrymen to virtual slavery. The scheme was dubbed the contract labor system, and the con men were known as padrones.
Italian padrones led armies of workmen to the United States, and employers, eager for abundant, cheap labor, hired thousands of them. As a result, many American laborers lost their jobs. On the 19th of June, 1884, the House of Representatives passed a bill that prohibited the importation of anyone bound by a labor contract. The proposal, approved by the Senate 8 months later, was christened the Alien Contract Labor Law. Unfortunately, the new regulation was rarely enforced. Besides, padrones soon found ways to get around it. Thus, the number of Italian immigrants entering the United States quadrupled between 1885 and 1888. By 1890, arrivals from Germany, Ireland, and Great Britain were decreasing, but the influx from Italy more than doubled over that of the previous year. And Italians, brought by padrones, continued to supplant domestic workers. Clearly, the authorities at Castle Garden were losing the battle against the contract labor system. As infractions of the statute mounted, lawmakers once again confronted the problem. On July the 25th, 1888, a group of congressmen led by Representative Melbourne H. Ford gathered in New York City to investigate alleged infringements of the law. The delegates questioned 15 Italian immigrants. All but one of them had been recruited in violation of the alien contract labor law. The members of Ford's committee unanimously agreed that the enforcement of all acts designed to regulate immigration should be entrusted to the federal government and not to the states. New York's Castle Garden would close.
On the 3rd of December, 1889, in his first annual message to Congress, President Benjamin Harrison addressed the immigration problem.
Our naturalization laws should be so revised as to make the inquiry into the moral character and good disposition toward our government of the persons applying for citizenship more thorough.
3 weeks later, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Thomas B. Reed, formed a select committee to look into the state of immigration and naturalization.
It seems more than likely that the subject of immigration will receive careful attention by the present Congress. The revelations of the Ford Investigating Committee, which showed the undesirableness of a large number of our immigrants, is largely responsible for the attention which has been directed to the subject.
Secretary of the Treasury, William Windom, would oversee the new undertaking. In February 1890, Windom toured the environs of New York Bay to find a place for the proposed Immigrant Bureau. He ruled out Staten Island because of its distance from the docks. Besides, it was serviced by just one railroad. Military officials objected to the use of Governor's Island. Castle Garden was also rejected because, as Windom noted,
It is surrounded by a class of people against whom complaint has been made for years in connection with this business.
The only remedy for the evils existing in the present system is to have the immigrants landed at a place absolutely under government control and where they will be free from evil influences of all kinds.
Liberty Island and Ellis Island remained the only viable options. During his excursion around the bay, Windom approached Ellis Island to assess its merits. But in his opinion, it had none. The Navy used it as an ammunition dump, and its shallow waters prevented his vessel from landing. Completing his inspection of Ellis Island, Windom said,
The difficulty of reaching it, and the observation we had at that distance from us, presented so few attractions for an immigrant depot that we steamed away from it, under the impression that even if we could get rid of the powder magazine, which is there now, it was not a desirable place.
Windom favored Liberty Island as a logical setting for the new installation.
It did not seem inappropriate that on the first landing of the immigrants upon our shores, the first thing they should see would be the Goddess of Liberty, and that the impression made upon them would be good as she lighted their way up the harbor and welcomed them to America.
William Windom's plan of putting a migrant facility on Liberty Island shocked his contemporaries and sparked a campaign to stop it.
The goddess of liberty would gather up her skirts in disdain and contempt of the immigrants from foreign countries, and the arrival of the immigrants upon our shores would contaminate her.
Wyndham's most prominent critics were journalists, whose inflammatory depictions of unwanted foreigners aroused public hostility. Chief among their subjects were Italians. In one illustration, Uncle Sam watches a flood of aliens pour into the U.S. The mob includes a German socialist, a Russian anarchist, and an English convict. But leading the ragged group is the most intolerable of Europe's refugees, the Italian brigand. Another image depicts a horde of outcasts dumped at the feet of Lady Liberty. The foremost figure in the crowd is an Italian outlaw.
Mr. Wyndham, if you are going to make this island a garbage heap, I am going back to France.
Wyndham may be balked in his determination to establish an immigrant station on Liberty Island. The fact that the pretty island had been selected by the administration as a site for a new castle garden has aroused every citizen of New York and the adjoining country to look upon the scheme as an outrage which should not be tolerated. Representative William McAdoo of New Jersey called Wyndham's proposition a discourtesy to the Republic of France, which gave to this republic Bartholdi's grand statue. Eventually, the controversy reached the U.S. Capitol.
The House Committee on Immigration and Naturalization and possibly the Congressional Joint Committee will visit New York next Friday. They will visit all the available sites in the harbor, and it's dollars to donuts that they will unanimously agree to save the little island already consecrated to liberty. They will be treated to an edifying spectacle also, for 1,600 Italian immigrants will be landed at the garden that day.
Congress quickly overturned Wyndham's plan to open an immigration depot at the feet of Lady Liberty.
The careful examination we made of Bedloe's Island induced me to think that it was entirely practicable and would be a very satisfactory place. I now find that, in the estimation of some people, I was very much mistaken.
Liberty Island is saved. The goddess holds her own, and the touch of the vandal will not desecrate the tiny island where she has her majestic stand.
On the 11th of April, 1890, lawmakers approved a joint resolution designating Ellis Island as the location of the proposed Immigration Bureau. The following day, President Harrison endorsed their decision.
The Senate has passed a resolution for the removal of the magazines from Ellis Island, and Secretary Wyndham says he will begin at once the work of preparing an immigrant station there. This is as it should be. The dark cloud that hovered over the glorious statue has passed away, probably never to return. Liberty and her island forever.
In the 1880s, Padrones brought thousands of Italians to the United States. During that time, attitudes toward the newcomers hardened as they displaced American workers. When the Secretary of the Treasury, William Wyndham, suggested landing migrants on Liberty Island, indignant citizens and a galvanized Congress opposed him. As a result, the nation's storied immigration center would rise on Ellis Island, and a half-mile of open water would keep the lowly foreigners from Bartholdi's famous sculpture. The unrestrained importation of Italian immigrants by Padrones had determined, in large part, the site of America's historic gateway.